where they breached Trump's attorney's attorney-client privilege and said, your lawyers have to tell us everything about what you've done. Did Fitzgerald leak anything to anybody? Was he getting these memos and passing them on? In other words, he's complicit in the leaks? Sounds like it might be a crime.
I've always thought that James Comey was a lifelong Republican. I've been told that James Comey is a lifelong Republican. Turns out not to be true. Are you aware that James Comey used to be a communist?
James Comey's lawyer, in a little bit of extra scrutiny and well-deserved, this post brought to our attention from Svetlana Lokova, and she is saying that Comey's lawyer, who is called Patrick Fitzgerald, might be much more than just a defense attorney, might actually be a co-conspirator who should be maybe recused or disqualified from the case, or at least opened up all of his records, all of his documents to determine if he was complicit in Comey's crimes. So this goes back a ways, all the way to 2017. Remember, Patrick Fitzgerald, in the arraignment of James Comey, said it was the greatest honor of his lifetime to be able to represent James Comey in his 2 criminal charges, lying to Congress and obstruction of Congress, and was excited to be in the courtroom. But now we remember that Comey and his attorney's name appeared in the records all the way back in 2017, sharing this post. Comey's attorney, Patrick, is likely a co-conspirator. There's a grand conspiracy. Comey's minute lie to Congress is just one small subcomponent of a much broader conspiracy, and he should be investigated, not allowed to represent him. Comey leaked classified information to him, which also made its way to the New York Times, claiming that he's using his legal privilege as a fig leaf. And if this sounds familiar, it should, because they made that same argument against President Trump, who has been largely exonerated, at least as it relates to these investigations. You remember this case all the way back from this Politico article in 2023, where they breached Trump's attorney's attorney-client privilege and said, your lawyers have to tell us everything about what you've done. Remember that this is what happened some time ago. A federal appeals court rejected Trump's bid to prevent special counsel Jack Smith from getting key documents from a lawyer for Trump. So the lawyer, they said, was open to discovery, to review. Attorney-client privilege was shattered for President Trump. Why? Oh, the crime fraud exception. You remember that? Your lawyer can't claim attorney-client privilege if he's helping you commit a crime. There's an exception to attorney-client privilege when there's a crime or there's a fraud occurring that your attorney is involved in. So Trump went to Beryl Howell, a maniac anti-Trumper judge, and she breached all of the privileges. Remember, we were sitting here going, what the hell's going on? After setting middle of the night deadlines, a 3-judge panel declined Trump's requests and said, yeah, Trump's attorney, Evan Corcoran at the time, has to give the documents over to Jack Smith. You have to, because she said that he was working with Trump. Well, what we have now is a very similar situation happening with James Comey, because according to Svetlana, this is something that appeared in an Office of Inspector General report that we have now dug up. And you remember it looked like this. August 2019, it's a document titled The Report of James Comey and His Disclosure. So the Office of the Inspector General, who's supposed to be more independent, did an analysis and wrote a review. What did James Comey do when he was disclosing information in handling certain memoranda? Well, they wrote a report, and you know whose name shows up all over the place in it? Patrick Fitzgerald, Comey's attorney. And as you can see, even shows up in the timeline. Comey was writing memo after memo and then sending them all out. Here's some more background. We've got the report that says OIG has done a bunch of research and got a bunch of findings, a lot of background on how this all works, what is top secret, all the things. Comey knows better. You can't give out classified materials. So here we have a timeline of relevant events. January 6th, Comey meets with Trump, and January 7th, Comey finishes one memo on the FBI's secure computer system. The memo is classified, secret, no foreign or con. But he emails the memo to a bunch of people, does not take a copy of that memo home. Then he has dinner with Trump, January 27th, 2017. All right, Trump is just coming into office. Comey writes another memo on his personal laptop about his dinner. It states that during the dinner, Trump told Comey he wants loyalty. Memo 2, another unrelated comment by Trump. Now, he does not mark Memo 2 as classified. He places a signed printout of Memo 2 in his personal safe at home and gives a second printout to the chief of staff. During a classification review, the FBI determines that 6 words in the memo are actually classified, okay? You actually cannot talk about those things. James, he's writing memos, printing them out, marking them unclassified. Does not mark that one as unclassified, okay? So he writes memos with classified documents, passes them out, and they're classified. But but he says they're not classified. That's illegal. Comey writes memo 3 on a classified FBI computer system because he thinks it has FISA info. This is on February 8th. Memo 3 summarizes interactions with Reince Priebus, RNC, and Flynn and others. Now, he does not mark the printout as classified and shares it with others. Goes into the FBI, types a memo up on a FISA computer system, and then shares it with everyone. Shares it with others at the FBI. FBI later determines in June, oh, guess what? It's again secret and it's classified. You can't share it. February 14th comes through. Another memo talking about Trump. He does not mark it as classified. The FBI determines does not contain classified info, but marks it at a lower level. Then March 1, memo 5, 4-line email to his chief of staff on his unclassified mobile device, and they find FBI not classified. Okay, so some of it's classified, some of it's not. Comey then comes before the House Permanent Select Committee, March, acknowledges that we've opened up an investigation into Russian interference, which was all rigged previously in the December meeting with Obama, and then they released the ICA in early January, the Intelligence Community Assessment, which reversed all of the prior findings. So then, March, Comey writes another memo about a 10-minute phone call with President Trump. Comey gives a signed printout to his chief of staff and takes a second signed printout home. Does not mark it as classified, and they say it's not classified, but they mark it as FOUO. Comey then drafts memo 7, 2-paragraph memo, summarizes another meeting. FBI says, yep, it is classified. Comey does not mark memo 7 as classified, but it is. FBI determined in June, yep, it contained presidential comments about foreign affairs, and so that's confidential, which is different than, let's say, classified, right? Different statuses, but you shouldn't be sharing it around. President Trump removes Comey as FBI director May 9th and orders Comey be barred from entering the FBI. Smart decision. Then the New York Times publishes an article regarding the January 27th dinner. Okay, so now the memos are being spread around. Richmond, Comey's BFF, a law professor from Columbia or someplace, says, I'm the source, and it goes on. May 12th, Trump then tweets about the possible existence of tapes of his conversations with Comey, and then Comey sends a bunch of the memos 2, 4, 6, and 7, from his personal email account to the personal email account of one of his attorneys, Patrick Fitzgerald. Before sending, Comey redacts the second paragraph from the memo involving foreign affairs because Comey deems it irrelevant. Then on May 17th, Fitzgerald, the now lawyer, okay, so he was involved in these emails and these memos. And the question, of course, is did Fitzgerald leak anything to anybody? Was he getting these memos and passing them on? In other words, he's complicit in the leaks? Sounds like it might be a crime. Sounds like there might be a fraud there. So maybe we should also be allowed, since the precedent has been set with President Trump, to breach the attorney-client privilege of this attorney, Patrick Fitzgerald. So they can look at all these emails, all the messages back and forth, and just go see what was going on here, just like they did to Trump. He forwarded those to other attorneys. Then Comey also sent a digital photograph of memo 4. Comey asks Richmond, will you please share the information, but don't share the contents. Leak it to the New York Times. Give it to a particular reporter. Comey is such a piece of work. Then Rod Rosenstein appoints Robert Mueller as special counsel. What a joke. FBI conducts a classification review, determines that Comey did classify the memos. Memo 1, which Comey did not share outside of the FBI. Memos 4, 5, and 6 are FOUO, and that portions of memos 2, 3, and 7 are classified. Memo 2 had 6 words. Memo 3 had information about sources. Memo 7, you get the point. Then in June, FBI begins the process of recovering or deleting the memos from the computer systems of Richmond, Fitzgerald, and Kelly, a process that is completed in January 2018. Okay, so we've got a lot of questions about this Fitzgerald person. A lot of leaks are happening at this time. He was getting memos, some of which presumably are classified or at least in that arena, being sent over to him, and he's passing those out as well. So is he also transmitting classified information? Seems like there needs to be some discovery on this, and an investigation should take place, just like they did with Evan Corcoran, Trump's attorney. And the precedent has been set. Thank you, Beryl Howell, for that one. If there's a crime or a fraud that's worth investigating, the crime-fraud exception applies, and you don't have attorney-client privilege. So we'll see if that ultimately comes to fruition. We know that the Comey team is going to be filing a motion to disqualify Lindsay Halligan. We've already seen this, saying, please take notice from James Comey's lawyers that we're going to try to disqualify Lindsay Halligan. And so that motion hasn't hit the docket yet, but they're telling us they're going to file it. But Lindsay Halligan is interesting, an argument to disqualify her. She's an acting U.S. attorney there, not Senate confirmed yet. But Patrick Fitzgerald, the attorney, may very well be a co-conspirator in the case. And so we are going to keep our eye on the Comey prosecution. We came across this clip from the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show, the guys who inherited Trump's time slot, and they dug this clip up from us where Rush Limbaugh is explaining exactly who these people are. Communists!
How many of you have thought, if you've thought about it, how many of you have heard or thought that James Comey was a lifelong Republican? I have. I've always thought that James Comey was a lifelong Republican. I've been told that James Comey is a lifelong Republican. Turns out not to be true. Are you aware that James Comey used to be a communist? In a 2003 interview with New York Magazine, James Comey said before voting for Jimmy Carter in 1980, he'd been a communist. He admitted, "I'd moved from communist to whatever I am now." Now, we know that John Brennan, Obama's CIA director, was a communist, or at least had voted for the Communist Party. But I had never heard this about Comey. Now we find out that under Obama, the CIA director and the FBI director both had histories of not just flirtation, but serious immersion into communism. And like the KGB always said, no one ever leaves the KGB. Nobody ever leaves this way of thinking.
Communists live on in perpetuity. That's their whole endgame. It's the slow march through the institutions, as they like to say. It's subversion of the old way in favor of their communist utopia. And now Comey and his lawyers and the rest of them coming under scrutiny for their crimes. We're happy to see it. And we hope that the DOJ gets this message and hears what Svetlana and others are talking about, that Comey's lawyer may be in the middle of a conspiracy and the crime fraud exception must apply. And so discovery is in order. We'll keep our eye on this one, my friends. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do.